Respect Party MP George Galloway, who has met Fidel Castro. You're a Democrat. Does that pose any problems in terms of how you viewed Fidel Castro?
Well, if people believed the package they've just heard, which could have come from Fox News,
I have to pee so
you
bad.
would think that Fidel Castro was some kind of tyrant. Well, I can assure you that's what your viewers will be concluding. That was the most biased package I've heard today, and I've been on the media all day.
Let's not go over the package. Let's not go over the package. I'm asking you a simple question.
The question is this. Are the Cuban people liberated from the misery that afflicts most of the people of the third world? And the answer is yes. They can all read and write. They live longer than they do in Washington, D.C. Their children are more likely to survive than the children of Washington, D.C.
They can't vote, though, can they?
50 years. Well, you know, health and longevity and education, free at that, these are human rights too.
But does that not pose you a problem as a Democrat, that they can't vote?
If you will let me finish, I'll come on to that point. If it were not for the 50 years of siege, blockade, assassination, invasion, subversion by the most powerful country in the world, just 75 miles away, then these other rights would have been achieved too. You'd be better addressing your questions to the United States of America, which for 9 administrations in a row has done everything it could to destroy the Cuban Revolution, precisely because it's an example to the people of the third world, not least Latin America, where more and more of them are following it.
But you can't blame Washington for the lack of democracy, can you, in Cuba?
Yes, you can.
And there's no doubt that some people in Cuba want democracy and want a say in their affairs.
Well, we all want democracy. But the facts are that in Latin America, the only way to get elected now is to profess friendship with Fidel Castro and opposition to George Bush, none of which was reflected in your package. Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez seem like the men of the hour, don't they, rather than Milton Friedman and Ronald Reagan?
Well, why don't they go to the electorate then in Cuba? If Fidel Castro is so fundamentally popular, why not make the transition to democracy now?
Well, when the United States lifts the state of war and siege on Cuba,
but that's irrelevant,
normal life can...
How can you say that's irrelevant, dude? That's literally not irrelevant. They're in a constant state of war with a much larger, much more powerful country. Dude, that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant, bruv. I don't understand. That's irrelevant. Oh, yeah, dude? Let me do war on your family. See if you start thinking about, you know, shoring up your borders and your security internally.
No, it's absolutely relevant. When Hitler was at the Channel ports threatening to invade us, there wasn't much democracy, and if you'd wandered around the East End proselytizing for Hitler, you wouldn't have lasted long.
Today.
There's every threat. They've tried to kill Fidel Castro hundreds of times. They've invaded countries all over the world, thousands of miles from their shores.
Hitler didn't stop democracy in Britain.
Yes, he did, as a matter of fact. Many democratic freedoms were suspended in Britain, especially for those who were proselytizing for Hitler. And that's the comparison that you have to make.
We didn't lose the vote.
Notwithstanding that siege. No, you did actually. If you knew anything about British history, you'd know there were no elections.
By the way, that's the same as like during World War II, even in America, like the Sedition Act, dude. Have you heard of it? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, I love when people always say stuff like, oh, well, the Russians were murdering people who didn't fight. It's like, dude, we fucking jailed people who didn't go to the draft either. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, we absolutely, justifiably, understandably took away liberties in time of war. By the way, there were unjustifiable things that we did too, like internment camps. Do not misunderstand me.
Are you saying universal suffrage?
Like, we don't do that anymore. We don't even do that anymore to the same degree because we're not fighting real wars. We're just fighting never-ending wars against insurgencies, okay? So it's counterinsurgency wars that don't even require us to stop the economy and hyper-focus on finishing this war. As a matter of fact, the military-industrial complex relies on there being a never-ending war. We have created this entire system in an effort to just like keep doing war, but far away, to counterinsurgencies and not even give a shit. But we did it after 9/11 with the Patriot Act as well.
Was ended by Hitler in the 30s.
The parties didn't fight each other throughout the course of the Second World War.
What about in the 30s when Hitler was on our doorstep?
let's talk about Cuba for a minute, can we? When Hitler was on our doorstep, democratic freedoms were curtailed in Britain. The United States is on the doorstep of Cuba and has tried to destroy it for nearly 50 years, and so some democratic freedoms are suspended.
So where do you see
But
the
people
future
live.
then? I mean, do you see the revolution continuing post-Fidel, or do you think there will be
Despite
some
you-
sort of transition?
Despite your propaganda, socialism will
come
survive
on, it's
in
not
Cuba.
propaganda. These are
Because
simple questions.
It's Fox News propaganda, which I've come to get used to
All
from
right.
Channel 4 News.
All right, fine.
This is
We'll
Fox
put aside
News, Bush
look, we will put
propaganda.
aside the abuse. I'm asking you a simple question about how you see the future of Cuba. Do you think there will be some transition?
Socialism will survive. I know that makes you sad, but it will survive. The free health service will survive. Free education will survive. Cuba will continue to be an icon for people around the world who want to see liberation and want to see the escape from the domination of globalized capitalism and United States domination.